You had already been experienced product manager,
Mhm.
experienced product leader before you joined Intentional Job Search. Tell me more about the situation. Like, what were you going through at that point in your job search?
I had names like Cisco, IBM, Apple on my resume. So I would get inbound requests. I recognized that the job market now was quite different. When you see the big FANG companies, the tier one companies laying off a lot of people, it clearly meant that you really had to be very, very good. It seemed like every 2 years or so I was in job search mode. 2018, 2019, I went through kind of a Google loop. I went through a Meta loop, didn't make it. So I knew that, okay, there was something missing in there. Trying to do it myself wouldn't really help. I realized, okay, having a structured program by someone who is trained and who has done this and who has helped other product managers through the process would be very useful. And that's what kind of led me to IJS.
Prakash, thank you so much for doing the session with me.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so first of all, let's begin. People who are watching this, they are considering intentional product manager in some format. So let's begin by a little bit of introduction. Like, tell us a bit, maybe 30-second career snapshot about you.
So for me, I think since grad school days, I was always interested in strategy. That's one particular subject I did well in. And so I thought, my goal would become to be a strategy consultant. Of course, it took me about 8 to 10 years to get there. And to do strategy consulting, I did operations. I worked in data and reporting and analytics for a while. Once I did consulting, though, I realized I actually like solving problems better. So meaning doing both the strategy and the execution. And so you could say that was my entry point into product management since about 2014, kind of in a formal way. I stuck with it and 10 years later, I've got a few products under my belt, still in data products and still AI products as the technology has progressed. So yeah, mix of big companies and small companies. So that's also something I like, is to have that variety under my belt.
Love it. So you had already been experienced product manager, experienced product leader before you joined Intentional Job Search. Like, tell me more about the situation. Like, what were you going through at that point in your job search?
I recognize that in 2023, I recognize that the job market now was quite different. When you see the big FANG companies, the tier one companies laying off a lot of people, it clearly meant that you really had to be very, very good in order to get a job. Doesn't matter which company, actually. So until then, I had been laid off from startups. Startups went under or whatever, right? So job search, it seemed like every 2 years or so I was in job search mode. And I was reasonably good at it, I would say, in terms of getting interviews. I had names like Cisco, IBM, Apple on my resume. So I would get inbound requests. I didn't have to do a lot of outbound, but then the market was completely different. And I realized that especially when 2018, 2019, I went through kind of a Google loop. I went through a Meta loop, didn't make it. Even went to Amazon, I think, loop, didn't quite make it. So I knew that, okay, there was something missing in there. Trying to do it myself wouldn't really help, that I needed some level of, coaching. And I had seen the value of executive coaching as well. I'd gotten some coaching through my job. So I knew that, okay, the coaching does have value. And it'll help me identify blind spots that I might have. I may think my answer is good, but it's really not really good because what the other person is expecting is something else. So all of that taking into account, I realized, okay, having a structured program by someone who is trained and who has done this and who has helped other product managers through the process would be very useful. And that's what kind of led me to IJS.
That's awesome. And I'm glad you especially you mentioned the blind spots thing, because that is just like, especially with more senior folks, that is so prevalent. It's like, you obviously are good, but there's just some blind spots there. So, okay, I then understand like what caused you to seek out a solution. Now, I would love to know, as you spoke with us, like what were the initial hesitations you had about joining the program?
So I think there are two things, right? I think perhaps it was first the investment I have to make. Like I'm out of a job and I have to make an investment of cash investment or money investment. So that's the first thing. So that means that for me, in my normal thing, like I tell my wife, okay, any estimate, any cost which is more than $500 or $1,000, you should get a second opinion, right? Just to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. So that was like one aspect. Okay, I'm going to make an investment of not just money. That means I need to follow through. So that is like
Yeah.
one part of it. The second part of it, of course, I think was the fact that, I looked at some of the testimonials and other things. It seemed like, yes, the sweet spot of this particular program was in the senior PM level, a lot of the folks there. And so my concern was, okay, will this help me, someone who is at the director level or a people manager level? Will this really also help me or not? Where the focus then becomes more about strategy, organizational change, a couple of other things, right? Once I was able to satisfy, my, concerns on both of those, then for me, it felt like a good investment in that sense.
Perfect. Tell me more. What did you do to satisfy your concerns?
So as I said, I had my own history of doing it myself. Meaning that when I went through the Facebook loop a second time, or at least the interviews, so I did a lot of mock interviews. I got better at design and product design and product execution. So I could discern what is a good kind of a thing there. But I knew that there's probably still something missing, because when you interact with a peer, now if that peer is very good, you learn, right? And I knew that out of 25 or 30 mocks that I did, there were like 2 or 3 people who would really stand out. And I knew these guys, okay, these guys know what they're doing. And I know in another 3 months or 2 months, they would be saying that I got into Meta or got into Google. But that seems like a high volume, low feedback kind of a process. And also, 2018, 2019 time, there was nothing really besides, getting Louis Lynn's book or Gail Lackman's book. Those are the only 2 resources you had as a product manager to understand, okay, this is what a case study looks like. But then, there weren't that many resources available. So I think that was a realization. Okay, what has got me this far will not get me over to that finish line. The second thing is, until now, until let's say whatever 2022 or something like that, I was still an IC. And then when I got the break into becoming a director and managing a portfolio with $100 million, now it's a very completely different ballgame, meaning that people don't necessarily look at your answers and think, no, you have to really speak like an executive, speak like a leader, think like a leader. So the bar is much higher. And I recognize that, okay, if I want to stand out in this very tough job market, I needed that kind of finishing, the polish that you see in a good leader. I could be a good IC, but if I wanted to be a good leader, then I needed to really walk the talk in some sense and showcase that in every aspect of my presence, whether it's my LinkedIn presence, resume, or the answers I give. So I think all of those things together, when I looked at the program, how structured it was, and then the last concern I had, if at all, like this wasn't like a time-bound exercise. Like you guys were saying, we will stay with you until you get a job, basically, and which is a big testament to the fact that, okay, you really wanted us to succeed, and the support will be there throughout. I think those are the things that help me kind of, invest and go along with the program.
I love it. Can I ask one more question on that? Specifically, you mentioned, like, hey, for my level, is this appropriate? Or is this just like for senior PMs, I'm at a senior level? How did you specifically address, or what things helped you address that concern?
So I think I did ask during this thing. So that was a conversation we had, right? And I raised this concern, and you said, no, it's not always. I mean, the bulk of the folks might be in that area, but we have placed quite a few folks who are in the director level and above. So knowing that helped, and then also the other thing, the track record. You said, you had close to 500 at that time. Now that number might be higher. So you had close to 500 folks. So ultimately, that really also helped. And then also knowing that at least in the tier one companies, they're all very structured interviews. Essentially,
Totally.
it's the same case study given whether you're whatever level you are at. So you really need to get better at that case study first and foremost. It doesn't really change to what degree. I mean, they'll level you based on your experience, of course. So that was the other thing, thinking that, okay, this is still going to be useful for me because I need to really get better to the point where confident about all the different aspects of it.
I totally agree. The question might not change. Your answer needs to change. It needs to be level appropriate, and that was exactly it. So okay, so now we're moving forward in the journey. So now you're in the program. Tell us about the first few weeks. What were some ahas that you got, or anything that surprised you during the first couple of weeks?
What I liked about the program was that it was very structured, and it started out with a clarity statement, right? So, meaning being very intentional about what your goal is, and then say that these are the steps which will help you get there. This is the time investment is needed to do that. So I know that job search is always like a up and down cycle. I get excited when a new lead comes in, and then the interview date comes in, and then disappointment later, or when the offer doesn't come through. So having a structured program that is kind of say, okay, first do these things, build your narrative, right? And I think the emphasis on the narrative was actually a good thing, because I realized, I mean, I'd built up my own narrative for tell me about yourself over the years, because I knew from my own research that it seems like a very casual question, but or an icebreaker question, but in fact, that can really set the tone for the entire interview if you really impress someone with that answer, by showcasing a part of yourself that people might not know by just looking at your resume or by your LinkedIn. So for me, that emphasis on the tell me about yourself as a starting point was a very interesting kind of thing, and it kind of helped confirm that, okay, these folks know that narrative is by far one of the big things.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
That narrative, it shapes everything you do after
Yeah.
that.
The second thing was, I think there was, there was more an emphasis on behavioral before you even get into kind of product design and the case studies. The foundation is the behavioral, and I think that also made a lot of sense, because outside of the, let's say, tier one, 10, 15 companies, many of them still have an intake process that is very much behavioral. Or situational, including Amazon, for example, right? Which is, they use all behavioral questions. So it made sense to focus more on that and get that perfect. And then you can consider that the design and the execution type of questions, or the strategy type of questions, are a very specific type of thing, and you should get to them later. But I know when we talked in the clarity doc, we said you could do that simultaneously, and that's what I did. I made progress on both of these tracks, slowly, but I did make progress. Yes.
Got it. Cool. So it was, just to recap, tell me about yourself, and then doing narrative first was the first few big ahas. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the homework there given, identify 10 stories or 10 accomplishments, and then see how to kind of get around that, right? I think I like that part of it as well, because you need to have a strong couple of stories for it to, which you can use at any point of time, and they should be internalized to the point where anything comes up, you can always refer to those stories as examples of how you would do it. Because I think it's also more show, don't tell, and that exercise of going through the stories, keeping them short and concise, that took time, no question, that took time, but I think it forced a certain level of clarity and thinking, working with Sam and a couple of others, in terms of, okay, you want your answer to be somewhere between 4 and 5 minutes. You want to give them the meat, the hook, and what action did you actually take? Otherwise, I realized that I thought I was okay or good, because I was passionate about my answers, but that doesn't really always carry through. I mean, people may relate to the passion on the other side, but if they're really looking for specific things in your answer, and I'm so focused on the passion and what went up and what went down and what actions I did. Like I'm lost in the drama or lost in the storytelling in a structured behavioral interview process. They may not necessarily care for that, right? So, and I think that that was a big thing also, is to be disciplined enough to really look at the what are they asking for behind the question. So when they ask you about conflict, yes, you give them an example of one particular situation where you dealt with conflict. But I think if you zoom out, what they're saying is, if there's a similar conflict at work, will this person burn bridges? Will he create a problem for me? Or will he disagree with the people in a way that will build collaboration and will build credibility, right? I think that's essentially what they want to leave that answer with, or what that's what they're looking for. So as I practiced more and more, I got a sense that, okay, yeah, nailing the narrative, nailing the structure is one thing, but always keep in mind what is it that you want to leave with, the takeaways. And that's by far that is very, very useful, I think. So I hadn't done that kind of work. Like I told you, I had done work on product execution, product with mocks and everything else. And behavioral was always thinking, I can tell good stories. I have lots of experience. But going through this kind of a structured evaluation of what it is and digging deeper into that really sets you apart, right? And this is exactly what I needed, because that was a blind spot. The blind spot is typically, I've seen, is on topics that I think I know well. Turns out actually there is some parts of it that I don't. Like if I look back on my meta rounds, I know I've been in metrics and analytics for so long, 15 years. I know analytics very well. But the reality was I knew B2B and, company metrics and financial metrics and all of those things, not B2C necessarily funnel metrics. I learned them, of course, but I still was not there at the level that someone like Meta or Google expects in terms of B2C metrics, right? So completely different thing. And that was a blind spot that cost me probably a few years in that sense. But I think it is so important. That's why to have a coach kind of evaluate your answers and give you that feedback and help you down the right path.
I love it. So let's take this forward. Like you mentioned a lot about coming across various blind spots. But tell us about the story of you landing your new role, what your new role is, and like how did that actually happen, and what part of the program fit in to make that happen?
So my new role at Meta initially started out as a people manager role, so at leadership level, which I was very excited by. It was actually inbound, which was rare, but very fortunate again. And it was a really good match in the sense that although Meta is mostly B2C, mostly outward facing social media, the role they had was for an internal PM, like for working on people products. And for the last, since Apple 2014 onwards, I'd worked at quite a few startups and worked on similar role within Apple as well, working on their internal HRIS system, rebuilding that completely from beginning to end. So in a sense, kind of building out a new Workday platform, if you will, that does everything that Workday does in some sense. So it's very relevant experience. They reached out and so went through the thing. Interestingly, at the leadership level, they do have to go through product design and product execution again, but the bulk of the interview is on behavioral. So out of the 6 interviews or so, only 2 of them are one product design, one product execution, but the remaining 4 were more behavioral. So all the work that I had done on kind of behavioral interviews, some of the other things, and the work I had done on getting better and product design and product execution, that really helped. Most of the prep, I think, was still in product design and execution because that tends to be the most ambiguous to some degree. You really have to get better with the structure. So the coaching feedback definitely helped there. I did a bunch of, during the 3 weeks at that time, I did a bunch of other peer, mocks with other L7 and other PMs at both Meta and Google. That really helped as well because you really want to practice at that level if you want to be successful. I didn't quite make the cut at that level because I think, again, if I look back now, my behavioral ones were getting to lean higher, but not consistently like strong higher or higher. So maybe that's what the difference was. I was getting to a higher on product design and execution, but not quite. And given that there were 4 interviews that are more behavioral, even if you do well in 2 of them, but not do so well on the other 2, it doesn't go forward. But fortunately, in my case, the hiring manager and I had hit it off very well. So I said, hey, I know I kind of didn't quite make the cut perhaps at this level, but if you have any L6 level or IC level role, I'd be happy to consider it. And he said, yes, I do have another role at IC, at the IC level. And are you really sure, though, you want to do it? Because there's a big gap in terms of compensation for them at that level. I said, no, this is, I like the team. I like, everything I've heard for. And so that took a couple of another 2-3 weeks. I submitted some more paperwork and I had to do the leadership and drive interview again, which is typical for all the other IC levels. And I passed that and then got the offer. So I'm very happy and relieved.
That's pretty awesome. And with the Meta offer, like you mentioned, the narrative was helpful, product design, product execution, sort of like the interview prep and other things were the things that ultimately helped you
yeah,
succeed.
And one thing actually that I should mention, and one thing that I think makes the IGS program that I haven't mentioned so far somewhat unique is the emphasis on mindset, right? And the mindset part of it cannot be emphasized enough, because if I look back at my previous attempts at this thing, this is not my first time going through a Meta loop, right? Almost like the 3rd or 4th time, I would say. The first time I was given a Excel-based thing for another role, and I was completely unprepared for it. I choked. I mean, I'm not I'm a good expert, decent expert in Excel, but I just completely choked. And then 3 years later, when I was doing this, for some reason I looked up the interviewer on LinkedIn, and she was like really accomplished and everything else. So for whatever reason, I completely was, when I choked again on that interview, I couldn't even think about 2 + 2 = 4, kind of that level of this thing. And so this time around, I was determined not to get ahead of myself and not let mindset affect me and everything else. But I forgot my own advice, I think, for my first round of interviews. So then kind of practice that meditation and some deep breathing and visualizing. Hey, this thing that really helped. So that's one aspect. Like mindset helps in the interview performance, because I could have prepared for 6 months, which I did on and off. I did, but then on game day, if you don't bring the mindset, I failed, right? I mean, this is personal. So the mindset is super important, not just for that, and then for the 6 months also that you're in the prep phase. If I don't have the right mindset, my productivity is going to be low, and that's what I realized. Like I was going through ups and downs a little bit. I was a co-founder for a little bit during that time. And the mindset is super important. So I think for me, the winning thing was here, having mindset coach on thing, and they keep tracking your progress, keep asking you, hey, how are you going to improve? What are the steps you're going to take to improve? Are you watching your videos again? Are you watching your interviews again and making the changes? So that was also another big thing for behavioral, especially recording myself, and actually getting it to a time, doing a couple of takes on it was really super helpful. And I know that's now what the process we are enforcing for all the other folks. That's absolutely super, super valuable.
Oh, I'll even share this with the existing folks, for them to know why it is so critical. Because you got to internalize that feedback, right? Like you can't just intellectually look at it.
Absolutely. And for me, that's a big thing, is we all live in the intellectual plane. Yes, okay, we understand it, we get it, but no, it's all in the application, right? For me too, that's why I realized, like for this round of Meta interviews also, I was not nervous at all, but the nervousness crept in by the second or the third interview for whatever reason. And it completely took me by surprise. But because I had the structure and I had practiced enough, I was able to at least give, like, not completely choke, but at least give like a half decent, performance. And so for me, that's again a big reminder that, you need mindset mindset, not only to power your preparation through, but also on game day to go into it with the right mindset, not think about, oh, this is so and so company. Oh, the package will be so big if I get it. Life will be so different. That's like getting ahead of myself, right? It puts me in a position of, more of a scarcity mindset and more of a, kind of more desperation, perhaps, even without thinking it. That's what happens.
Love it. Thanks for sharing that. That's very helpful. Last couple of questions. So Prakash, just putting yourself on like sort of third person perspective, if you were to describe what the intentional job search program is in your own words, how would you do that?
I think to get a job, we all need support. I mean, yes, I may be super determined, I may have great skill set, all of that stuff. So the support for me, I think what IJS gives is support in multiple different forms, right? A, of course, there is the structure of building a narrative, going step by step, watching videos of what the right process is, learning frameworks as needed. So that's all you could say the theory to some degree, right? So you have a structured theory to follow. But that's not enough again, right? Theory is not enough. Like I can read a book, but it doesn't get you that far unless you're an excellent student sometimes. The second step that you provide is support in terms of people support. People support comes in two forms. For me, IJS gives both coaches from these big tech companies as well as, who are versed in narrative and also in evaluating your case study examples, where you're going wrong, how to do segmentation, all of that. There are group classes as well, where you can do it collaboratively, right? So that's a one level of professional, let's put it this way, professional support. The other part of it is always support, knowing that we're all in this together, because job search can be a very lonely aspect. I'm going through my own leads and I see someone else. I feel both envy, jealousy, whatever it is. It's a roller coaster of emotions. So having that peer network and giving every week kind of a support to each other, celebrating and everything. That's the third part of the support, right? And last but not the least is the mindset coaches, right? I think that is like the hidden kind of a layer that powers everything. Because if I'm depressed, no amount of theory, no amount of professional coaching, no amount of peer support is going to help me. I need to kind of pull myself out of that funk so that I can do the tasks I'm supposed to do. I know I'm supposed to do these tasks, but if I'm still feeling somewhat depressed, then this is where the mindset exercises are super important, right? So for me, IJS is worth its weight in gold in terms of those things, right? Because trying to do this alone may make you successful. It all depends. But if you want to increase your probability of success, right, then get support. I mean, don't try to do this alone. Is my, whatever your level, there's value to be had. Is my takeaway.
Awesome. You already answered my next question, which is like, who is it perfect for? I think you described it already pretty well here. Awesome. Any last things you would like to say for anybody watching this? For any program, like they say, any diet in this world will work. My thing is that it'll work if you stick to it. Yep. So people basically drop out. They're not consistent. Any workout program will work as long as you stick to it. You will see benefit. You will see value. So for me that's the approach I have with IJS. Now, I to be very honest, I didn't necessarily 100% agree with every single thing that I like, the theory or every single kind of, methodology or anything else like that. But, you take what is useful, and overall, even if you get 60, 70, 80% value from it, perfect, right? I mean, that's all you can hope for. There's no like perfect cookie cutter solution for everyone. Everyone's situation is different. So, but you have enough resources here. As I said, you have enough resources, you have enough support, and it is personalized to whatever degree. So I don't think there should be any hesitation for someone who wants to be, especially in product management, right? And also this is very focused on product management. There are a lot of executive coaches out there who help you, and I've had 2 executive coaches myself, leadership coaches and everything. They all help you kind of unlock what your true potential is. But this is a little bit more prescriptive in that sense. Okay, you do this 1, 2, 3 and that has its own value. It's like how to become a better product manager, how to become a better software engineer, right? So
in that sense, I would say. So for anyone considering it, that's what I would say. It's not a silver bullet, but it's like a great set of resources and programs. So
Thank you so much, Prakash. Really appreciate this input. I'm sure people who watch the video who are considering IPM would benefit a lot from it. And congrats
Sure
again
thing.
on your awesome offer at Meta.
Thank you again. Thank you, Shabbat, for your support and for running this great program. Yeah, and for finding me to, and for letting me be part of this program. Yeah, hope to give back in any shape or form, of course. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks. If you want to be one of our next success stories, make sure you book a call with us. I've left a QR code for you to scan. Go to our apply page, book time with us, and chat about your career and your journey to your dream product management role.